last name, by the way?
It's Neuwald.
Neuwald. All right.
Well, that's how we started Neuwald. So
that's where we're gonna start with the Neuwald. All right, guys, what's going on? The Macro Perspective Pete's. It's Seamus and Marcos again with a great episode. Today we've got Nick Neuwald coming in. Background in nutritional sciences, master's there, and he's a PhD candidate at Penn State. And a lot of his stuff today we're gonna be dealing with is nutrition behaviors, eating behaviors, and things like that. Nick, why don't we just go ahead and start off of what is your exact background? What is it you're studying? What is it you're doing right now? And how you had gotten into this world? I know we learned a little bit in the pre-podcast recording, but let's go ahead and we'll just start into it with you.
Yeah, I'll start at the very beginning. So for as long as I can remember, I actually wanted to be a physician. And so I was pre-med all through undergrad. And I actually worked in a lab and I did research as an undergrad for 4 years. And I actually worked in an evolution lab. So I worked with fish. I'm not sure if you can see it on you can't see it on camera, but I have a bunch of fish in my house. So I was studying like the microevolution of fish and everything. So I did get interested in research early on, but my whole purpose of doing research in the beginning was just for padding my resume to get into medical school. And so to that end, after I graduated, I wanted to get more experience. And so I worked as a surgical assistant for 2 years. So I would hand, the physician scalpels and things, and I would even I would cauterize wounds. And I ended up through, observation, ended up really realizing that I did not want to be a surgeon. I did not like the lifestyle. It was just very depressing and monotonous. And so, I was sort of having a life crisis. And at this time, I had, thanks to my friends, been getting into fitness for the first time. And I had never even entered a gym until this point. And so I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it. I just sort of one day woke up and sort of had an epiphany and said, I'm tired of just doing nothing with my life. And so I quit my really well-paying job and I took a job at Vitamin Shop that paid, I think it paid $9 an hour or $8.50 or something.
Oh man.
At the same time, I was in a relationship. I'm now married to that person, but I was in a relationship with this girl, and I didn't want to. I wanted to continue my education and get a master's degree, but I was kind of limited on options because I didn't want to leave her, and so I applied to one school, which was the University of Miami, and this was my one shot, right? So I got into the master's program, having never taken a nutrition class. I got into this master's program, and
wow, all that time at Vitamin Shop, all the nutrition bros probably.
No, there was so much bro science in Vitamin Shop and everything, but it was a great experience. I actually loved working there. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. Damn, you can interrupt me whenever you want, by the way, but
that's so powerful. You're just kind of at a standstill in your life. It sounds like you were kind of I need to adjust for something. And you took a major leap, to be at a great job and then to go, screw it. I'm going to go to Vitamin Shop and kind of start from the rungs from the bottom and then go all the way back up to the top to get a master's. It's and plus with the relationship, it's kind of it's a harrowing reality because everything kind of falls on your shoulders and that relationship falls on that too. So that must have been a tough transition.
I feel like I needed it. I feel like what I realized was if I want to actually get into this relationship seriously, I need to be making more money. And knowing my disposition, it was if I'm going to do something for the rest of my life, it has to be something I'm super passionate about, or I'm just going to be so depressed. I can't continue doing this for the rest of my life. And so it was well, what am I even passionate about? And it was nutrition. I had no idea what these people made. I just knew that if you're passionate about something, the money will come, and it has, and it's been really working out really well. To continue on that point, Miami was extremely expensive. I did not have the money to afford Miami. So, but this was my only chance. I just was going with the flow. And so I enrolled and I met this amazing person. So his name is Dr. Wesley Smith. He's actually an exercise physiologist. Okay. And he also just teaches a lot of nutrition. But ended up having an amazing relationship. And I got the one graduate assistantship they offered, which paid my entire $60,000 master's degree, plus gave me a stipend, plus gave me teaching experience, plus set me up to get my PhD later on. So that was super amazing that I got that.
That is so cool. Let me ask you, and Marcus, you can butt in as well, but like you said something about like, I want to do something I'm passionate about for the rest of my life. What was it about the nutrition that was so passionate about it? Because like, like my background's more in exercise science, but I've tend to found like I love a lot of nutrition as well. But what was it about the nutrition that you love that like stemmed with you? You're like, oh, I gotta find that, and I'm gonna follow that trail and keep following more trails, because obviously you got a master in it. Now you're doing nutritional science like a PhD candidate. So what was the thing about it that you were like, I love this, like I need to learn more about this?
Absolutely. So if you look at like, the main causes of mortality in the United States, it's like heart disease. It's all these preventable chronic diseases, many of which stem from obesity, most of which is preventable with a healthy diet. So I realized prevention is really what's going to help the most people, because I'm still interested in medicine. I'm still interested in public health, and to answer your question of what specifically about nutrition, I think that what I like about it, at least my specific subfield, is it combines so many different types of fields that I'm interested in and never knew exactly how to combine them. Psychology, evolution, medicine. It combines all these things that I've delved into and into like this one specific field. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Marcos, we have our next Peter Attia coming up. It sounds like we have our next Peter Attia coming up, right?
Or Lane Norton, man.
Or Lane Norton, it sounds like as well. Yeah.
But I love how, like you mentioned, like once you got real world experience with something, you're like, I don't really know if this is for me. Because I was kind of the same way with being an engineer. I was like, I'm gonna be an engineer, be an engineer, right? And I interned at a very young, at like 16. Granted, looking back, I'm like, kind of every job is kind of the same, so wouldn't have been much different. Behind a desk, working on a computer, maybe doing some CAD or whatever. But I was a quality assurance intern, and I'm like, this doesn't, I don't know, this doesn't seem like it's gonna be too much fun. And it didn't put a sour taste in my mouth, but it was just, I'm like, I don't know if this is for me. And sure enough, like years later, here I am doing this for fun, connecting with people, trying to learn to network, doing nutrition coaching and wellness coaching, and Seamus and myself going through a class together to become master health coaches as, once we get through that. And yeah, I mean, I think we're slowly but surely stumbling down the path that we didn't even know we needed or wanted to do. It's just now it's like opening up. And yeah, I think it's cool.
I agree. Yeah. I agree, Marcos. Like my background, is I wanted to go to school to be a doctor of physical therapy. Like I just want to be a physical therapist. This was before like they even said like you needed to get your doctorate and everything like that. But I was interning, I was doing hours. And I just at the time I didn't like the whole physical therapy world, because like when I went to intern, it's like, oh, just get this person on stim. And I was like, I think there's like more to physical therapy than just like sitting here and putting someone on stim. But at that time, I kind of was training people and I was coaching people, and I was like, I love being a personal trainer. I love being a coach. And that really stemmed into this world of like, now, yeah, we are doing this wellness coaching, all this stuff 10 years later. So yeah, it's very much so like it's been this winding path, and I found myself expanding even more, like Marco said, just expanding even more. Marcos, would you have any questions to follow up with Nick though?
What exactly is your emphasis? Are you using like what's your emphasis?
So I'll start from the broad and work my way down. So I work in an eating behaviors lab. So we specifically look at the micro behaviors that people, there's many things we look at. So one of them is the micro behaviors people do while they're eating and how that influences how much somebody eats, how full they remain until their next meal, what they choose to eat, the energy density, like food choice. So a lot of the psychology of eating we focus on. And then to get even more specific, we tend to focus more so on obesity prevention. And to get even more specific, we tend to focus mostly on children, because a lot of these behaviors that we can talk about, they first develop, early in life. And then as you age, as you enter adulthood, they just become really hard to change. They become very ingrained. And,
So wait,
intervening early is going to actually lead to lasting change.
yeah. Speaking of, actually, my cousin works in a hospital setting with kids specifically, like, and basically your path, but like in the application side versus the research.
Mm-hmm.
The newest one, and what is it, like the selective criteria eating NARDs or whatever that? What's the acronym for it? I always forget. Do you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah,
Where
yeah. It's gosh, I don't think it's NAR. I think it's something similar.
yeah, it's like food aversion something or other. Like basically, you only eat a select number of foods.
Yeah,
Right?
so we call it you're right. We call it picky eating. I know it seems silly, but
Yeah.
I know the acronym. It's
Well. So she
yeah.
opened it up as I'll go research. I'll Google it somewhere.
ARFID. Yeah,
ARFID. There you go. Yeah.
Arfid, yes, yeah.
And she was
Yeah.
talking about this, and I was like, "You literally are describing my son." But it's like the palatability and the experience of food is so like for a kid, it's exactly what they would expect every time, and they'll stop eating unless they get that exact thing.
Totally.
Right?
So we do this thing called repeated exposure. There's a lot of research on repeated exposure, but you basically have to keep exposing a child to that specific flavor, and you have to keep with it. It could be like 17 times, 20 times that you have to keep exposing them, and they're going to hate it, hate
Yes.
it, hate it. And what you're really trying to do is build acceptance, right? You're not trying to force them to eat it, because as soon as you force them to eat it, what you're doing is you're linking this negative experience with this flavor. And then for their entire life, it's almost like, have you ever been drunk on alcohol?
Mhm.
And then
then
yeah,
you
when you get the hangover and you associate that alcohol with like feeling like shit, right?
Yes, exactly. It's
Yeah.
Pavlovian, right? You're associating these negative experiences with the flavor, and then you end up hating it for, forever almost. But
Yeah.
so what you want to do is you want to pair positive experiences with the flavor just to build acceptance. So again, but another thing is they do is like so a lot, there's like this myth that if you make it more enjoyable, like flavorful, they're going to suddenly like the vegetable. So I'll give you an example. Like if you put a bunch of cheese and butter or something on broccoli, the kid's suddenly going to like broccoli. What you're actually doing is you're teaching them to like cheesy broccoli. Like this is really specific. So if you want them to like a certain flavor, it has to be that exact flavor. As soon as you change it a little bit, it's essentially a new food. So like the covert, there's some, a lot of the industry, food industry is trying to do like covert manipulation of food. So they'll like put vegetables and fruits in like basically very processed, snack foods. And then the parents buy it because they think it's healthy, which, it's probably, better nutrient quality than it would be otherwise. But it's not teaching the kid to like the food any more than it would be to just not do anything at all of this. So.
Dang, that's so freaking powerful. Like, so what you guys are doing, like, what other things are you trying to pair? So you said you pair a positive with like a food with repetition. So like, are they getting like a reward? Like, I know you mentioned Pavlovian, but like, what are they pairing? Like, what are some of the things?
So to give you some examples, eating with your family. So the healthy food is there, but that's not the focus. The focus is on the experience of around that. So like, for example, I know this isn't commonly done, but imagine a birthday party. There's a lot of positive feelings. There's presents, it's like a really nice experience. And then you get a birthday cake. And so you associate, the flavors of the cake with this experience, but it's a similar idea to how you could possibly pair healthy food with this positive experience. So really the biggest thing is honestly eating with your family and having conversations and not screaming at your kid to finish their vegetables. That's the opposite of what we want to do. But I would say it's important not to directly reward a child eating a food. Like we don't want to reward eating. That's just going to lead to like overeating. Or like, and you shouldn't reward with food. Like you shouldn't be like, if you finish your homework, you're going to get your favorite food. You're going to get like a soda. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's nuanced.
Well, what do you mean? All my parenting tricks to coax my kid into eating something are not. I mean, I should be doing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like most parents do this, right?
Yeah, you finish your noodles before you get some gummies. Finish your chicken nuggets before you get your.
Basically, you're valuing this. Okay, so you're taking this unhealthy dessert food, and you're putting so much value in it, all of a sudden the kid's just going to value it more. So like there's this thing where if something becomes a scarce resource, it becomes more valuable. It's probably why a lot of foods like caviar and stuff are so sought after. But if you suddenly have this dessert and you make it a super scarce resource where like you can only access it if you complete this like really difficult task, you're just going to binge it once you eventually do get access to it. It's interesting, in the lab we have this paradigm, this type of protocol we do called eating in the absence of hunger. And it's basically, to give you an idea, it's basically a way to assess hedonic eating. So to put that in other words, eating for just food reward, or eating just for like flavor and pleasure. Thank you. Yeah. So eating just for pleasure, because we have these two sort of regulatory pathways, this homeostatic pathway. I'm hungry because I need energy. So therefore I need to eat, and the food tastes good because I was hungry. Like there's, it's your body's way of like regulating your energy states. And then we have this whole other pathway where it's hedonic, and the two overlap and they interact. But the hedonic pathway is essentially the reason you still want to eat potato chips, even though you're completely sated and you're completely full. It's the reason we have dessert belly. We want dessert even though we just ate Thanksgiving dinner. It's this just because pleasurable things are pleasurable and we seek pleasure. But some people are way more susceptible to this hedonic eating than others are. So to test this, in the lab, we have this, we give them a whole bunch of food, this normal standard meal. We tell them eat until you're completely full. And then right after, we bring in a whole tray of like a variety of snack foods and M&Ms and ice cream and brownies and stuff. And basically we look at how much they're going to eat of this. Yeah. Where was I going with this?
I mean, it sounds,
it
honestly, like, it sounds like where you're going is like, that's why, like, the dessert belly that you're talking about, like, I know that I have that, I've eaten everything on the planet. I'm like, and then something comes, but it sounds exactly like what you're talking about with like obesity, obviously being this pandemic now that like, we're 53% of the population already there. Is it 2 out of 3 people by next 10 years definitely will have it, either overweight or obese? Like that's a trend.
1 out of 5 children are obese.
Yeah, it's insane.
Crazy.
And it to me, obesity was like my big thing was my big research. It's how I won my girlfriend over. She's a registered dietitian, and she saw my speech on obesity, and it's like she's like, man, that's insane that like these are statistics. And it's like what you were talking about there though was like people are using things for pleasure. And just kind of doing it for pleasure. And like, obviously, like I'm not against it, but it's like knowing when to play that hedonic treadmill of like, when is enough and when is in moderation, and seeing this. But my question is, with the kids, like, what are you seeing are negative associations? Because we're trying to do like positive associations with foods. Like, what are the negative associations? Like, I know, for example, like when I was doing my research on obesity, like, why is obesity so high? There was a correlation with the fact that like the colors that they used in kids programming on commercials, the ads. Like,
my God.
Like, for example, I use a Trix bunny. I'm like, the Trix bunny is the ad, for obesity. Like, like, for example.
Yeah, this is a great segue. I'm actually part of an R01 research project right now called REACH. That's Resilience to the Effects of Advertising in Children. So I'm working on this sort of right now. But going back to what I said about pairing positive emotions with food, that's essentially what these advertisers are doing, is they're taking this fun cartoon character, you're instilling these good emotions, these good feelings around food. But if you look at recent ads, if you look at like McDonald's ads, they don't even show food anymore. What they show are like family members having a good experience with their child, maybe doing something completely unrelated to eating. And then at the end, it's like a McDonald's. It's so weird. So you don't even need to show the food anymore. And what's funny is if somebody is very food cue responsive, so there's somebody is very responsive to advertising, to this sort of manipulation. If you're driving down, and my wife is, if you're driving down the street and you see like a billboard for McDonald's, subconsciously you suddenly want McDonald's. You've paired the logo with the delayed reward of eating McDonald's. It's wild. And so like
Oh,
what I'll
man.
do is if I see a billboard and I know my wife saw it, I'll be like, "Hey, you want Taco Bell?" And she's like, "How do you know I want Taco Bell?" Like, because it's subliminal. You don't even think you're doing it.
It's I mean, that's a thing. That's the thing, though. Is like, this conversation is going to be borderline more like psychology and philosophy, obviously, and like where do ideas really come from? Like, where does like the idea of like inception come from? Like, is this my idea or is this manipulation from other things? And from advertisements, from like my understanding of advertisements is like, before it used to be like 6 advertisements for one thing for the person to come to an idea of like I want to do this. But now it's like attention is like you need to see something like 30 to 40 times. But when it comes, it sounds like with food, or it sounds like with this stuff, it's like, no, the brain can be hijacked pretty fast. It sounds like, because food is such a powerful motivator, and also at the same time a powerful pleasure thing. Is that like correct to say?
I would say definitely, but to talk more about ads, so a lot of nations are actually completely banning advertising to children. So children in specific, this is specifically mostly relevant to children. So adults have this ability to distinguish ads from real life. They know they're being tricked in a way. They know the purpose of the ads. Kids, I think it's up to 12, or maybe it's a little less than that, but like the kids I study, so like, pre-adolescents and younger, they don't understand that. They don't understand that the ad is even trying to trick them. They don't understand that the ad is not real life. Children are way more susceptible to advertising than adults are. So a lot of nations know this, and they're actually banning advertising food products to children. So to get around this, and this is very prevalent. If you go on Twitch, or I'm not sure how prevalent it is on YouTube, but if you go on Twitch, you'll see, I think it is prevalent on YouTube, but you'll see content creators advertising for the ad companies, and they'll get paid on the side, and so it's this very subtle, now legal placement of ads, but it's even more devious because the kids love, like, I don't know, Ninja or somebody.
They love Ninja, they love Mr. Beast, and it's like, hey, Mr. Beast says get the Whopper. It's like, of course I'm gonna get the Whopper.
Yep. And again, it's this pairing these positive emotions, so it's even probably more powerful than just a regular ad would have been on the TV. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that, because right before this, I'm filling out an Amazon ad marketplace, right? So like commissions for sending links to parents and people, and putting it on my website. And the question they asked was like, are you intending on this ad serving people under the age of 13? So I think 13 is the cutoff, and you're like based on the legality of it in terms of language. But it makes sense because, like, again, right? Like, what are you trying to do? Not everybody has the same moral compass, if you will, when it comes to serving an ad. The goal is to drive revenue, and of course, make the shareholders happy, right? I want more money so that I can eventually retire, and like this whole thing, this whole feedback loop, this positive feedback loop of like making money in your later years, and that delayed gratification, I think is kind of part of the problem.
Yeah.
Right. I think it is a parental problem, because like we're all chasing financial freedom, we're all chasing these things, and I got stumped with this weird psychological philosophical question. And it's related, because what would I do to make a buck in the now, right? Versus how would, and what to what grounds am I willing to do that, right? And to me, I'm like, well, in my ethics, how I want to continue to do business is giving everybody everything I possibly can, practically for free, right? Don't want any monetary compensation, and I view then the compensation will come from that. But again, if I had other people, entities, shareholders, other people were like, hey, you're not hitting your 10% growth mark quarter to quarter, right? Why should we invest with you anymore?
Yeah.
Right. And it's this idea of constantly scaling of businesses, I think, is the thing that I've identified as the problem and the root cause here. Right.
Yeah.
And like you just said, people are willing to curtail the legalities and the language. And hey, we'll quote Ninja, we'll give you X amount of dollars if you just slip in our, product here for 5 seconds, or product placement, right? We know how, like, why is he drinking, G Fit or whatever fuel source, or while he's gaming, right? It's just, it's a what is that? Subliminal messaging, essentially.
Yep.
Right. And I actually noticed this at the Masters. I was like, where are people advertising? Why the hell would I want to watch this? And I was like, oh, it's on the shirt, it's on the hat, right? It's just enough with whomever is at the top of the game right now that's getting that ad money, right? Because
Right.
the goes on for forever. There's not really a ton of ads, right? But they found a way to put product placement.
Damn.
Yep. You know, it's funny. We were interested in doing a study where we try to do the opposite. We try to pair healthy food and subliminally place healthy food with content creators to see if that had an effect. So after a quick literature review, we realized this has already been done. I think it was a group in the Netherlands, but they found nothing. They couldn't get any sort of like increased product acceptance or anything with.
Is it just the dopaminergic response of sugar and other things that are there?
I think it's because it's more than just pairing positive experiences. Sorry, it's more than just advertising a product. It's the fact that the products aren't inherently rewarding. So you're trying to, So, I mean, these foods are inherently rewarding. They activate, like you mentioned. So the dopaminergic response.
I wanted to ask about that. Like, so for example, like we talked about behaviors of eating, especially with children, and now we talk about ads. I wanted to ask you, like, the next thing, and probably you feel like with obesity, that being the trend, that being, the thing that we're fighting, we're apparently the country that figured out like how to not die from starvation. It's how to die from overeating. But my question was, what are other things that companies are doing with the food to manipulate those dopaminergic things? I mean, I know we've talked about probably like highly palatable, highly caloric, highly enticing. What else are food companies doing to kind of finagle the litigations or the legalities of things, if that you've noticed in the studies?
Yeah. Okay, so food science has come a long way, and we're able to basically create what's called, this is one of the things like they're able to do with food, but what's called like dynamic exposure. So essentially you put a food into your mouth and the texture, you have like many textures, many complex flavors, all from this simple like corn chip, for example. So you're basically able to tell your brain you're eating, a delicious like taco, even though you're really eating this cheap flavored chip. So there's a couple things. They're able to make food hyper palatable. So I hate that word, to be honest, because it's basically a word they invented to basically say junk food. It doesn't actually mean anything other than that. They're trying to quantify it now. Like there's some different criteria, like, like if it has this % salt, this % sugar, it's therefore hyper palatable. But then dog food fits in that category, and so I mean,
I'm trying to get my protein in.
I would say this. I would say the reason we eat so much quote unquote hyper palatable foods is partly because they taste so good, but it's mostly because these foods are incredibly energy dense, which means that per gram, you're getting an insane amount of calories. And so you're eating so much more of it because it doesn't fill you up as much as whole foods does. The fact that it's so delicious is probably part of it, for sure, but it's not the whole picture.
Yeah.
You almost answered my question, but so you mentioned like on a per gram, so like pure gram of weight basis, it has the ability to have like a caloric punch to it, right? More or less.
Oh yeah.
But,
way more than anything natural. Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned like criteria is being defined with like salt and sugar content, right? Like a certain, but if you were to just look at it from a purely observational lens, which it seems like your science is very observational based, would it be like the willingness or the unwillingness to go back for multiple handfuls? And you've done 5, even though you're like, hey, we're just putting this out there. I want you to eat some, right? Eat as much as you think is necessary. And then people that go back for a 5th or a 6th or a 7th time, wouldn't that be like a more appropriate example here? Or or do they know the math numbers to that? Is that what you're saying?
So you're getting at something, actually. You're getting at the idea that this is hyper palatability. Is it a quality of the food, or is it a quality of your experience eating the food, right? I feel like a lot of scientists are trying to make hyper palatable a term that defines the food rather than our subjective experience of it, which really at its core, that's what it is. Like if I had nausea and I couldn't taste anything, are potato chips suddenly going to still release that dopamine? No, they're not. It's about your taste. It's about how the food, when you eat the food, and it's different for each person, right? Some people are way more susceptible to junk food than other people are. So I don't know. I think what you're really getting at is, yes, it's based on how the food affects you rather than it being a quality of the food.
Yeah, it's subjectivity, right? Like it's either objective. It's like you guys came at it, or you mentioned an objective example, and I thought, to me, hyperpalatability literally meant like, again, the subjectivity. Because again, like you're going to subjectively pick your hyperpalatable food. Some people are like, I love roasted peanuts, or I love roasted,
Totally.
like that can still be considered a junk food and hyperpalatable because you're not eating it in its raw form, right? In the raw form, you're like, I don't want anything to do with it. But like salting it now makes it quote hyper palatable because the salt, and like it was just interesting because it really is an experience, right? Personal.
There's plenty of quote unquote hyper palatable foods that are defined as hyper palatable because they meet that definition that I absolutely hate and find disgusting, and so I'm not going to overeat with it. So it's actually this really like contentious thing right now currently among scientists. It's still something we're still trying to really get a consensus on how to define this, what does this term mean? Is it important? Is it a relevant term?
So okay, I'm sorry, Seamus, I have like something like right to this. Now insert Ozempic or tirzepatide or Mounjaro, which now again you're still getting that heightened experience, right, of a quote, like you just said, subjectively hyperpalatable food, but now it's blunted, right? So I think, do you think there's anything there that they're like trying to come up with that like objective term or terminology, right? And then like this thing then cures, like even you eating hyperpalatable foods, you will still eat less, therefore you will lose weight.
I mean, people have been trying to do this for forever, right?
Yeah.
If they can, that would be amazing. I don't think that the science shows that anything has really been that effective. Or if it is, it's effective in the short term, and then they end up getting the weight back. You know, I mean,
well, that's what they said about Ozempic with semaglutide. That was like a year and a half later. Like if you were off of it, you dropped like 22%. But like if you're off, it actually like came back up or worse. But there are some GLP inhibitors. Or is the GLP-1? I forgot. Yeah, GLP-1
agonists. That are pretty new ones that are shown to be really effective. But as soon as you stop taking it, like you mentioned, so it's like, do we want to do this for the rest of our life? Is there a better way?
Well,
I think it seems like a Band-Aid, you know, and also, you know, obesity is just one thing. Eating these unhealthy, I hate the word unhealthy too. Eating these hyper palatable foods, these nutrient poor, energy dense foods, that's going to increase your cancer risk. It's going to increase a lot of other things. So it's like you're putting this Band-Aid. Maybe you won't eat as much, sure, but at what cost? Yeah, you're still very unhealthy. You know, every time you eat something that's nutrient poor, you're displacing something that could have been in your diet that's healthier. And again, there are other diseases than obesity. So.
I want to get you on the podcast. I mean, sorry, in our weekly forum call with
dude.
Our
you need to be
because I mean, again, the biggest thing that then stimulates those pathways, cancer risk, all those other risks of all-cause mortality, as our doctor would mention on these calls, is generally due to obesity. So that thing, right? Like even if you're eating quote low quality foods, or what you described it as, he's like, but they're at looking at the internal numbers now, they are far better off. Right?
I agree. I agree. I mean, there's surgeries that you can get for obesity, and I would be like, I don't want somebody cutting into my body and doing surgery, but hey, it's better than being obese, like health wise, you know. And again, if this is something that helps the person, and it's the, you know, as a last resort maybe, and it helps them to lose weight, I think overall, it's going to be better for you to do that.
Well, I think the answer here would be you can't be charging $1,500 a month for something like this. You have to produce it at scale, give it to people, for everybody to solve the problem.
It reminds me a little bit of diet soda, because like a lot of people in my family are like, ew, why are you drinking diet soda? And then they take a regular soda and start drinking it. I'm like, yes, diet soda is not good for you. It's bad for you. But if you're replacing it with full sugar soda, you know, come on, like
and the point in the case here is like, I remember a pouch of like Capri Suns being like 70 to 100 calories when I was a kid. And we bought some for my son yesterday, and they're 30 calories now.
Oh.
Right? Because they
artificial sweeteners,
they put monk fruit. It's not artificial. It's not artificial.
Natural.
It's natural, naturally occurring, right? And that's, again, like, I mean, me as a person is like, well, if he's going to gravitate towards something, at least they're making an effort now. Cost per serving has gone up, but at least the risk of childhood obesity goes down, because I want my kid to enjoy life too and not demonize like good or healthy. Like, we want to make everything as comfortable as possible, give him an experience, right? And he's very limited in the foods that he generally selects, whereas my daughter eats anything and everything, right? So opening it up to new things. Oh, it's a little bit sweet. Oh, yeah, I actually want like something salty like chicken, or I'll try that meat out, and again, not sensationalizing that thing or the sweets like you mentioned, to piggyback off of that being like, okay, this is on the pedestal. This is like, if I eat my healthy, my growing food, I get the sweets. But I'm trying to just, again, like the person we had on episode 18, she talked about that, a similar kind of a similar type of exposure frequency, 30 to 40 times before you might get to actually truly engage with it. And now, since you've mentioned that from the psychological, like study side, and she's mentioned that from anecdotal observation and coaching people in that, okay, there's a commonality here in both angles, right? The application and the actual like scientific literature, so to speak, right? And I think it's perfect. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, hey, son, you want to just try a little piece? We give him a taste, and he'll smell it, he'll lick it, he'll do all these things with it. And I'm like, check another one off on maybe potentially that food existing in his repertoire in the future, right? Yeah. And it's such a weird thing. I'm like, I'm open to it. I'm like, he throws it on the floor, he throws it away. I don't care, right? Yes. That was another exposure piece. Whereas before, I'd be like, well, he doesn't like that. I'm not going to give it to him at all. Right.
Yeah. Reminds me a little bit of cleaning your plate. So like when I was a kid, obviously you have to eat everything on your plate, even if I liked everything. Again, it's this sort of like force feeding. And what that really does is so children, and there's actually this really interesting study from the 20s on this. I got to talk about the study actually, because it's so cool. They couldn't do this now because it would be completely unethical. There's a lot of studies like that, right? But they had this baby, and they had it in the lab at a very controlled environment for a long period of time. And they basically gave the baby a smorgasbord of various foods, and they allowed the child to self-select whatever it wanted to eat as much or little as it wanted, and they monitored its growth. And so the idea was, the question they were trying to answer was, can they self-regulate? Like, because that's the question. Like, do you need to force feed your kid? Are they going to starve if you don't do that? And the baby grew completely normal, was completely healthy. But some of the foods they would feed this kid are like raw beef and like some weird foods that you would never give a kid nowadays. But so as you age, though, your ability to self-regulate declines, right? So to the point where when you're an adult, you basically, you need to rely on sort of external cues in order to self-regulate. You're not going to be able to just naturally, there's this thing called like intuitive eating, like that's a great skill to have, intuitive eating, but most people can't actually do that anymore.
I don't like the intuitive eating. Like I my understanding with like obesity, understanding leptin and ghrelin, is that people have insensitivities to like a leptin or their ghrelin signaling. So it's like, oh, I'll eat when I'm hungry. It's like, well, you actually don't really know when you really are, though.
A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't. A lot of people have very poor interoception, and they can't sense their internal signals, or they sense their internal signals, or incorrectly. Like they think they're hungry, but they're feeling something else.
Yeah.
It's very.
Or you just degaff it. Hedonic tendency comes in. That was literally me last night. I'm like, everything was perfect up to this evening, and for whatever reason, I have no control. And I don't care. And I'm like, why? Like I'm like, I can't figure it out. And I'm like, and it's like, I'm not missing out on it. It'll be here tomorrow. But like, there was just something that like kind of consumes you to want that. And like you just said, like as an adult, it's harder to want to regulate that, maybe because it's like, oh, it's going to be like a little hit, like.
So there's a psychological phenomenon called the what the hell effect. And that's the real name. That's the real name of the phenomenon, is the what the hell effect. So basically it's like, if you indulge a little bit, you're way more likely to suddenly just say what the hell and just completely go crazy. And as far as why that is, to answer the question of like why things that are the way they are, why we think the way we think, I always go back to evolution. So I always think, okay, so why did we evolve this way? And so that it's more of a thought experiment for most things, because we will never really know. But like as far as why people are obese or why people gain weight, it's because that's what we're evolved to do. We're evolved to take advantage of our resources and get fat while we can, because your next meal is not guaranteed. You're going to be more likely to survive a famine and have offspring if you take advantage of the delicious foods that you have available to you right now. In our modern environment, that's not an issue, but that doesn't change our tendencies, So
people need to remember that like obesity is a protective mechanism. Like it's a protective mechanism, and people don't understand that like that's the whole point of it. The problem is with technology, with society, with food, the way it is, especially in our Western culture here in America, it just seems that it's just so that we've taken that mechanism and just hijacked it to a point that it's like it's having inconceivable, negative side effects that now like what 1 in 5 people are obese, 1 in 3 or 2 to 3, and that is a cascade effect of like heart issues, strength issues, nervous, and I read the book like The End of Alzheimer's, and it's like we're looking at the concept that like things might be because obesity is what causes kind of Alzheimer's, but there's more to it obviously, but like there's a high correlation there to be like, in your old age, it's like if you just actually did your lifestyle choices, you probably would have been better off, but it's so difficult.
To make the story even more grim, and I'm not sure if somebody on your podcast has talked about this, but even if you have never, been obese, right? If your parents were obese, and they while they were having you in utero, these things affect you. They affect your disposition to become obese later in life. I was talking about this.
Genetics, or is it
it's epigenetics. It's epigenetics. Yeah. So basically, like if you have gestational diabetes while you're pregnant, your child is more likely to be a bigger child when they come out, and they're more likely to be overweight later in life. It's epigenetic. Yeah.
There's another one too, like not just epigenetics, but studies showcasing, like there was one in 2009. I was just reading a few, but like studies of just social, environmental, like if you have a friend that's obese, you're 50% likely to become obese yourself. And then like if they don't know, if they're not obese but they know someone that's obese, you're still 20% likely to get obese. It's like I don't even know the guy and the guy's making me obese. Like what's going on?
It's funny because that I think has to do with like if you think about it, it affects your environment. Who is your environment. So if you know somebody who's engaging in a certain lifestyle, it's tempting, and but I wonder, it's so hard to disentangle that aspect from the genetic aspect, because like essentially, like if you're doing a study and you're trying to find out like, oh, your parents are obese, so you're more likely to be obese because of genetics. But what about that is environmental? Probably a huge amount, and then even if you separate them at birth, and even if you do like twin studies, right?
They've shown that like it's they can come out different, right? Like might have different gut microbiome that supported certain things. The other twin did, and they still had the same kind of upbringing, but one was obese, one wasn't. It was weird. Like,
so I always hate the numbers they give you, like, oh, it's 30% genetic and 30 or 50% environmental and all these things. It's all just the same thing. It's all just interplayed together. There, it's like your environment affects your genetics. I think the genetic aspect is not that. We had the same genes that we did 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. It's just the environment's changed,
Yeah. What would you say, Marcus, if you have any follow-up? Like, I know we've kind of talked about some of the big levers pushing obesity, but what would you say like are the big levers to prevent it? Is it like down to the individual? Is it down to the group? Is it down to the parents? Like, is it the policymakers? What is it in our country that needs? Because like it's our country in of itself, America, that is like as a country as a whole, like we have to have drugs like Ozempic, semaglutide, like just to get you back to normal. Like what the hell? What are your thoughts on, like, maybe in your own personal thoughts or what you've seen in the literature?
Sorry, was that directed at me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a serious problem. So I would say, as far as who's responsible, it's everyone. Everyone is responsible for themselves, but at the same time, I don't think we can fully blame somebody for becoming obese, because their environment is just the environment is so powerful, and some people's life situations are very different than your own. You may not have the resources. Like, for example, some places there is no build environment to get proper exercise safely. You can't get to the market. There's no options, healthy options for you to access safely and affordably. So, and America is very diverse. I think that's one of the reasons is like, America is so varied in its socioeconomic status. What's the word I'm looking for? It's socioeconomic, like, variety, like, amongst people. It's a massive country with massive different types of individuals. So I think for some people, individual change is going to be more effective than for others. But it's definitely, I think for children, we can't blame the individual when it comes to children, but we have to look at the parents there. But I think it starts in childhood, with the parents. But I would say, if I had to choose somebody to really put the blame on, I would say it's probably going to be the policymakers, because that they're the ones who have the most direct influence over the environment. And but
I mean, what do you
again,
think?
it can be everyone.
Like recently, like with the recent thing, like by the time of this recording, like last week, there was a news article, and I talked to some folks in the field about this. But in the military, like, they were moving the fat percentage up from like 18 to 26 for females to like 30, something like that.
Yeah.
And they were telling me, like, that's just dangerous. That's just dangerous because, yes, you might have the athleticism. Yes, you may be able to get the job done, but it's dangerous because there's going to be more injuries, more liability, more time off on the field. And I don't know, like, I feel like, we might be going in the wrong way with that policy right there, with like, hey, just to get more people in the military, we're going to allow you to be fatter. It's like, dang.
You know what?
That's scary.
You just mentioned something, Seamus. I would be willing to bet Ozempic, Mounjaro, whatever the companies that own those products, are going to have a government contract here very soon.
Oh, they're gonna have a government contract.
They're gonna have it, and then that's just they're gonna argue the case that we can't have our military be bigger. We have to find a way to keep them slimmer, right? And then there's less food costs associated with it, and I mean, if would you say agnesia, right? When you can't taste anything?
Agnasia. Yeah.
Agnasia. Imagine if you made a drug that created agnasia plus a GLP-1 agonist, then you would just never want to eat. Like, you're like, all right, I'm just.
That's what COVID.
COVID did it.
Yeah, a lot of people became unable to taste or smell because of COVID. Very interesting. Yeah,
but you still would be cued on salty and sweet, though, ironically. And like, you could still, like, I know that it's this, I just don't enjoy it, but I know that like my mind's excited. I'm like excited that it's salty or sweet. It was
the thing with that is it really is much more powerful if you can pair it with an immediate, like very immediate reward. And so sometimes if you don't have that delicious taste, the reward might come later, and then you may not pair it as strongly. But I see what you're saying for sure. It's still going to be rewarding, especially if it's like simple sugars, like candy or something. Yeah, for sure. Like the energy itself is,
Oh yeah, and speaking to this, because you mentioned we were all talking obesity here, and I think by clinical definitions it's BMI, correct? Height versus weight.
Yeah, for adults it's BMI. For children it's percentage.
Okay. So it's not even the same? It's not even the same for both of us?
No. So for adults it's like basically cutoffs. I think it's like overweight's over 25, and then obese is like over 29.9 or 30 or something. And then for children it's based on your percentage, your BMI percentile for your age. So like overweight is if you're in the 85th to 95th percentile BMI for your age group. And then anything over the 95th is considered obese. And then there's even like different types of obesity, like type 1, type 2, type 3. Like you could be 120% over or something. And then below 5% is considered underweight. So if you're between 5 and 85, you're considered healthy, or I'm not sure they still use the word healthy, but like, normal, which is still the wrong word because it's not normal to be healthy anymore. It's, it's more normal to be like,
well, you just described a standard distribution curve, right? In which one deviation from the mean encapsulates 67% of the data. You just told me that 53% of America is already fat. So theoretically, this model is old and dated. So if they were to update the BMI standards, it would be off.
Yep. Yeah. Right? So, BMI, the whole standard was never supposed to be based on how you fit into the general population. It was supposed to be based
made by insurance policies?
Wasn't it like, you might be right. Yeah. Because we all know BMI.
They were using it as like, they were using it to like see how well your health was so that they can like give you an insurance policy for your life insurance or something like that.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So really BMI is only useful in large populations for like data collection and things like insurance. As far, I'm sure you guys all know this because I'm sure all of you are overweight because you're muscular, right? So your individual, like it's meaningless. It's a meaningless term.
But but that's, I mean, again, I am technically classified as obese or overweight, whatever that is. Right. I think it's actually obese due to my weight to height ratio, right?
Yep.
Body fat percentage, I think I teeter again. Like I probably wouldn't make, I don't know. I probably wouldn't make it into the military, but with a little bit of work, I could be there, right? Like,
sure.
But I'm also not doing things that are overly active that would get me to a leaner body fat percentage, right? Yep. And theoretically, having a little extra body fat going into war would be a benefit because I have energy reserves, so I could go longer than somebody that's 10%.
That's an interesting point. It reminds me of so I used to be really interested in history, and I learned that a lot of the Roman gladiators were actually kind of overweight, if not obese. They weren't these like Spartacus Maximus looking guys, because getting cut with a sword and being overweight drastically increases your odds of survival. So a lot of the,
It depends though. It depends though, because I did some consulting with the military and I did some stuff, and I did a lot of biomechanical studies. Marcos, like for example, I was consulting with like engineers, and these engineers were part of like an exterior special forces group, and they did not have a reserve specialty for that like didn't have like a physical or strength training program for them outside of the reserve. So these guys would, be in the reserves. They'd come back. They're like, hey, we gotta get you back in for some training, and they couldn't even do the training. And the problem is, biomechanically, they're so overweight. The problem is they're carrying things up to 60 to 120 pounds more. And you would look at gait analysis, right, Marco? So when you look at gait analysis, the heel strike to the toe off, all that stuff, there is a 40% likelihood of more ankle to knee issues, which then would be a liability because they would notice with these military forces, they couldn't get special operations done because they couldn't even take a damn hill, or they couldn't even take a special spot just because they were out of shape and overweight. So it's like, I get where you're saying on that. But again, with the fitness stuff, like, or with the body fat percentage, it's not just the energy reserves, because we're talking about energy, but it's also like the biomechanical argument as well, in terms of like the job itself. Now that's a military conversation. I think there's more to it than that, but yeah.
So I used to work, I don't think I mentioned this, but for 2 years, I worked for the University of Miami football team, as part of their nutrition department. So that was the University of Florida, but yeah, everyone drinks Gatorade.
Oh, damn, I'm sorry.
And so a lot of the players, are technically obese or overweight and have very high body fat percentages, because that's what you need to be a defensive end. Like a lot of the players, they need to have that weight in order to not get injured. But one thing that's really sad especially in football, but probably some other sports as well. But after you get cut from the team, or after your season ends, or your career ends, and you don't make it to the NFL, or even after the NFL, they still eat the same way that they did while they were training, 5 hours a day and burning 5,000 calories. Jeez. Because these behaviors are ingrained. This sort of, and you're not just suddenly going to change your behavior radically like this. And so they almost always end up obese. It's very sad.
So I mean, we've worked with plenty of these people, like in actual application.
Yeah.
So we know, I'm like, damn, these are the hardest people to fix because they've been shoveling food in for so long. And I noticed it's like you see everybody that's like an announcer that was once an NBA player. You're like, damn, look at them. They look like they ate themselves, you know, however many years later, because they got away with it, right? That their energy demand was so high, just like you said. But nonetheless, right? It's funny you mentioned the eating habits or the habits that you built at critical milestones of your life, right? My parents are like, you are the fastest eater. And I'm like, I developed this fast eating technique because if I didn't eat it fast enough, people would constantly ask me to eat my food at lunch.
Yep.
As a kid.
Let's talk about this because eating rate is one of the like biggest things we study because it's so powerfully linked to intake and to weight gain later in life. So just a couple things I'll say. Well, first of all, when I'm talking about eating rate, there's a couple of different ways. If you look at studies that study eating, you got to be really careful because the way it's operationalized is very different depending on the study. So some people define it as like how much energy you're consuming in a meal. Over like divided by like the time you took to eat the food. So if I serve somebody cheeseburgers and they ate slowly, your eating rate's going to be really high because you just ate tons and tons of energy in a smallish amount of time, right? So the way I'm thinking of it is like, you know, taking bites rapidly. You know what I mean?
Yes. You're saying like relative rate depending on calorie demand versus like absolute rate.
But it's crazy because we're one of the only labs, like there's only that actually operationalize eating rate that way. So we'll this is something I do is I'll sit and I'll watch people eat their meal and I'll code every single bite they take. And so that's what I'm using. I'm using their bite rate. And I'm not only coding that, I'm also coding the time they're actually spending with food in their mouth. So if they're stopping eating to go to the bathroom or to just stop eating for a second, like I'm not including that time in the equation. So I'm really looking at like how fast somebody's eating while they're actually eating the food. So that still is very linked obviously to intake and
their mastication rate, if you will.
Essentially, I mean,
that's crazy.
So there's this, I don't want to go too sciencey here, but there's this thing called aura sensory exposure. So the idea that like the longer that the flavors of food go through your oral cavity, how do I say this? I guess the more rewarding it is. It's sort of to not be too sciencey. So as you eat food, the hedonic quality, the rewarding aspect of that food tends to decline, right? Relative to other foods. So that's why you get sick of things essentially, but you're still hungry. So like I'm sick of eating this food. It's because as you're so that rate goes much slower down if you eat really quickly. So if you don't savor the food in your mouth and you just kind of swallow, it takes longer. You have to eat much more of that food in order to get sick of it. So you can eat more of it before you get sick of it. But it's crazy because in some countries, like we have this visiting scholar from the Netherlands, which is a country we do a lot of collaboration with. And she says that in a lot of elementary schools there in the Netherlands, they're limiting the window that kids are allowed to eat to just 15 minutes, right? And then if the teacher or whoever wants the kids to have more eating time other than 15 minutes, they have to have an educational movie playing for the kids. So they not only have to eat fast, but they're distracted while they're eating. And it's just
it sounds like what Marcos was like getting at. Like I remember like because Marcos and I are going through something from Precision Nutrition, and that's a certification body, and then we're going to do like a board certification. But I remember being coached by my PN coach like 7 years ago. And I remember he goes, hey, your habit this week is to time yourself eating. I remember timing myself the first time. I was like, I'm going to eat normal. It was like a minute and a half for a full plate. And I was like so surprised. I was like, that was a big plate, Seamus. How the hell was that a minute and a half? And I was like, holy cow. So he coached me up to the point where it would take 20 minutes to eat. Like he built it out like, hey, take 20 minutes to eat that. And I get it. I get like some people like, hey, you only got the 15 minutes with the kids, or like, hey, you have a quick lunch because you got to drop off the kids somewhere. It's like,
Yep.
I feel like food becomes this thing where it's like, if you're not mindful about the time, like everything else can kind of supersede it. I know we all have busy schedules. We have the kids, we have work, we have a deadline. It's like people just use the food, but it's like, it's so important because for me, what I've realized, this is just from my standpoint and myself and the clients that I coach, is like, I can get to a more reasonable weight with less food, but I actually feel a lot fuller when I'm like drawing it out. I really feel like if I
Absolutely.
just draw it out, but it's crazy, man. That's I can't believe that kids are,
They're
that's such a
limiting that.
pivotal time, man. Oh
Yeah.
man, it's rough
And
to
then
hear.
eating on the go is becoming super common in our society. And so like the more distracted I feel like you are, the quicker you eat. Because it's literally the opposite of mindfulness, right? Being mindful versus being distracted. And of course, everyone, even me, when we're eating, we always have to have the TV in front of us. We always have to be doing something else on our phone. We can't just sit and like sort of be mindful. It's very hard, so
Too
yeah.
many distractions. I feel like the answer to obesity isn't a food issue. I don't think it's a policy issue. You know what it is? I think it's just a agrarian lifestyle approach. Like slow everything down. Like
Yeah,
just
it would work.
slow everything down. Like not everything. The work's gonna get done. The kids are gonna be okay. Like if everything can just slow down, I bet you to be a lot of reverse of that obesity.
Down with
Possibly.
down with deadlines, yo. Down with
Down
deadlines.
with
I feel
deadlines.
like
Go
it's
to
because
the
it's like
4-week workday.
It would at least help with stress eating for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I think to that point of like mindfulness and the speed and the habits that are ingrained and it's over a lifetime and it's like you can't undo your childhood, your parents, your upbringing, or the lack thereof, right? Like all those
Yeah.
things then just have influenced this. And then here you are at 20, 30, 40, whatever your age is. And then you step into said program with us, right? Where we're trying to be helping you bring awareness to this. And you're like, nah, it's no way that it's that thing. And it's like, no, we talked to some people that study that. And it does have a massive influence on those things. And again, now I look at coaches that have been in the space much longer than myself, getting great results. They're all talking and preaching the same thing. Whereas before, I was like, mindful eating, nah, like just macros, you're good. But like Seamus just said, the exposure or limiting screen exposure with eating, taking 20 minutes and trying to spread it out, building a new skill set around it, I think is the biggest takeaway today. And it's like
Yeah.
it's gonna take time because I know I suck
Yeah.
at it.
Yes.
And I remember every time I used to eat penne pasta, the reason why I loved it so much was that I never had to chew it. I would just
Mm.
bite, swallow, like literally, it would just slide straight down. And I look back and I was like, that's why I loved it so much. So maybe I need to get like spaghetti and angel hair and something that's just, not
We
going
we
down for speed eating.
we do that. We do studies where we have like al dente pasta versus overcooked pasta. People eat more of the overcooked pasta. There's a study we not we did, but people who I work with have done where they showed that if you crushed up cereal and then you served it to someone versus like whole cereal, they eat more of the crushed up cereal because they have to chew it less. Like it's wild how powerful this eating
I
rate
would
stuff
throw that
is.
Thing with
away.
the mindful,
I
the
don't want. I
mindful,
would literally throw that in the trash about everything. I'm like, really? Like this is the study? Of course, you would eat more, but like, I
Yeah,
want the crunch. I want the texture.
for
And I think
sure.
yeah.
savoring the experience of eating now has been again what you're saying, like, and what Seamus is piggybacking off of what you just said. I'm like, no wonder why like dry cereal right now is like it hits on another level because I can
Yeah.
slow it
Yeah.
down and one little bowl can take 15 minutes and it takes more time to digest 160 calories versus bowls of whatever Honey Nut Cheerios or
Well,
uh
it's
Loats.
funny. One of the most satiating foods you can eat per calorie, is soup. And the reason I think this is like debatable, but the reason I think it's so satiating is you're forced to kind of eat it slow because it's so hot, and you have
Yes.
to,
You
you
should
can't
make
just
a
like.
soup diet book.
I mean, yeah. But that's neither here or there. But
I wanted to ask you because you kind of talked about stress eating, and I know it kind of goes back. What are some of the biggest trick? I think we can kind of end off here because I want to be mindful of your
Sure.
time, Nick. But biggest triggers of like stress eating, what kind of triggers, what kind of behaviors you see in stress eating, whether that's an extreme case to just a daily practical case that you see in folks. But yeah, can you share about that?
Yeah, I would say it's another way to think about stress eating would be like emotional eating. So eating in order to soothe emotions, and this is something that you may have learned as a coping strategy in your youth, and it's worked for you. It doesn't actually work, but it's something that you're used to doing. Kind of like drinking. Drinking doesn't actually soothe. I'm talking about alcohol. Doesn't actually soothe anything, but it's still something we do because whatever, I don't know, psychology reasons. But it's similar. It temporarily, I should say, helps address this sort of emotional issue that you're dealing with. And so again, if you pair this positive experience immediately with the decline in your emotional valence, right? That then it becomes much more ingrained, right? Even if long term you realize that, like after a couple hours it comes back, or after a couple hours I feel sick and even worse, maybe. Like it's not that immediate gratification is very powerful. Some people, they find other ways to soothe their emotional issues. It's just food is one of the, maybe it's video games, maybe it's talking to someone, maybe it's whatever. We all have our outlets that we go to. For some people, it's food. And that's
with stress being so high, like we were just talking about, lifestyles, deadlines, kids, it's like it's constant. Stress is constantly there, so the food is constantly there to answer.
Food's always there,
Yeah.
It's always there.
Oh man, that's crazy. Marcos, any last questions though, just to lock this up? Man.
I'm like kind of geeking out because I feel like I can live vicariously through you. This is kind of cool because it I love the psychology element. I feel like there's a lot of math associated with what you're doing. And again, like I said, like you mentioned the eating rate being different amongst practices. And it's like, I mean, we deal with that all the time. And it immediately made me think of the VO2 test, like absolute VO2 versus relative, right?
Yeah.
Absolute is literally, the volume of oxygen. It's like, it's one thing where you're thinking like bite rate and something very specific that's like timed versus like calorie plus that. And I'm like, man, the exposure to some science and learning science stuff is pretty fun and cool. So I really appreciate your time. This was awesome. And I'm sure there's like so much more to delve into. We'll have to maybe
do a part 2 and a 3 probably.
Yeah.
Nick, what is it? Yeah. What is it you're doing now? What are you excited? Just so that we know what you're up to, where people can find you, what you're doing now that you're excited about for your foreseeable future, brother.
Yeah. So I'm in my last year, like I mentioned, of my PhD. So I'm currently working on several projects simultaneously. I can talk about those real quick if you want, but then I'm hoping to do like a postdoc somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where. I want to stay in academia. Like I want to be a professor and teach. So I'm working on a project right now where I have developed this novel way to assess interoception in children, because the current way we assess interoception is very questionable as to how accurate it actually is. And so we're hoping to validate that in kids, as well as put it in a few different kind of studies. And then I'm also working on, I mentioned how I watch videos of people eating and I code behaviors. So one behavior that I'm sort of trying to, as part of my thesis, say is an obesogenic eating behavior that no one's ever talked about is switching between different foods while you're eating versus eating one thing at a time. So there's no studies on this. And so, well, until mine, but I'm trying to explain that, like, if you're alternating between various foods in a meal, it increases your sensorial variety. It delays sensory specific satiety, which so basically it keeps the food tasting better for longer. And so you eat more food in general. And so I'm doing a couple studies showing how this sort of switching between foods is a behavior. So if you go to meal, people who tend to switch a lot tend to always switch a lot, kind of like eating rate. And then people who tend to
switching, right?
Say that again.
Like task switching, right? Like the psychological phenomenon of like task switching and all those things, right?
Yeah. That's something as a possible mechanism as to why people are doing this. But for example, I will eat one thing at a time. Like I'll eat all of one food and then I'll move to another food and then I'll move to another food. And so, yeah, that's sort of like what I'm interested in right now.
Well, I would love to see when that study comes out.
Findings, which is better? You don't have to disclose.
So it's it's nuanced.
Okay.
So if your meal that you're eating is very energy dense, quote unquote, unhealthy, it's better to not be a high switcher because you're probably going to eat more of that food. But if you're eating a variety of vegetables, a variety of fruit, like a low energy dense, high nutrient quality meal, maybe it's better to switch. Maybe you'll eat more of it and you won't get sick of it as fast. So it depends on what your food is, you're eating.
Sounds like Stan Efferding was onto something with the vertical diet there, Marcos. Having the mash together, having like just your meat, your rice, and your.
Well, that makes sense.
Oh no, that's so true. No, yeah.
You're
like. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I mean, that's why they talk about bulking with the vertical diet being so easy.
Yeah.
Like because it's already mixed and it's like kind of an easy thing to get done. And you're not switching from too many things, and it's energy dense.
So the reason why that might actually be hard for some people is you're constantly eating one flavor over and over and over again. It becomes very easy to get sick of that. So so that's the only downside. I'm sure it is easier, but it leads to sort of like monotony of just eating the same flavor constantly. That's why people like to have an appetizer and then go to the entree and then go to they like to have variety in what they're eating. Makes them eat more and makes it more enjoyable.
I can't wait to see what this study comes out. This is gonna be, like you said, it's the first, so it's gonna be groundbreaking. I'm excited for that. That sounds great.
Yeah,
thank you. Well, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you got to. I mean, I didn't know what we're getting into today. I just knew that we had a guest on.
Neither did I.
This was honestly like so. Everybody that's been coming on lately has been killing it. So we really appreciate you.
I'm gonna be honest with you. Thank you so much. How we met, just for the audience, I think I told Marcus, we didn't say it at the beginning of the podcast. But Nick and I met virtually on Facebook because someone asked something on a poll on Facebook, and Nick answered with like, "My background is nutrition," and like, "Oh, it was about salt, right? Salt being it leads to more cravings or something like that."
Can I talk about the study really fast? Sweet. Okay.
I would love it.
So basically, somebody posted like essentially a joke on Facebook where somebody was saying
comments. I had like 500 comments.
It was a really commented post. You're right. But somebody posted a joke on Facebook where it was people incorrectly correcting other people. So somebody posted this conversation where it was like, hey, did you know that salt or sodium, I think they used the word sodium, sodium makes you hungrier. And then the person responded with like, no, it doesn't. It makes you thirstier. And then the person responded with, yeah, it does. Look it up. And so if you look it up, like Google will tell you, like sodium makes you hungrier. So the study that I kept getting sent is they had two groups and they had two different pasta dishes. So one pasta dish had an unsalted sauce on it, and the other group had a salted sauce. And they found that the people ate more of the pasta with the salted sauce. And so the conclusion, right, being that sodium makes you hungrier. But no, it's because the salted pasta sauce tasted better. And so you enjoyed it more, you ate more of it. And I suggested that there's no real evidence, that there's some weird evidence about maybe sodium increasing ghrelin or whatever. But if you really wanted to get to the answer of this, and no one's done this because it's dumb, they know the answer already. If you have people eat a salt packet, right, and then you give them the meal, and then you have another group that doesn't eat a salt packet, and then you give them the meal, they're going to eat the same amount of food. It's the experience of the salt enhancing the flavor of the food that causes you to eat more of it, not that salt makes you hungrier. And so it sort of became this sort of jargony, nuanced conversation. But that's sort of where it was at. Yeah.
I love that group, and I love that we were able to meet you there. But Marcos, any closing words, man?
It's funny because I salt my food now, and I actually eat far less. So
wow.
but I learned at a young age that salting didn't allow me to eat as quickly or eat as much. And again, like I was so constantly worried about eating enough and getting big and playing football and sports, and it's funny because you trick yourself into learning behaviors. And it's funny that this started over salt, and salt's something that I use now a lot more frequently than ever. So it's cool. All right. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you for joining us. And thank you, Nick, our special guest for today. This was truly something that we are super excited to bring out to the world when this drops. Hopefully everybody here got something out of it. If you have additional questions, we will have all of his information linked in the show notes. You can get in contact with Nick. Additionally, if you guys could comment and subscribe, we would greatly appreciate it. And thank you very much.